Welcome to the Disruptor Network podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Disruptors podcast. For this episode, I have the honor of interviewing global speaker and voice coach Carolyn Goyder. She has been featured on TEDx. Her talk, Surprising Secrets to Speaking with Confidence, has been viewed more than 9 million times. You can also catch her new book, Find Your Voice, which unpacks and develops the secrets of speaking with confidence explored in this TEDx hit. I hope you enjoy this episode.
Ignition.
Carolyn, welcome to the Disruptors podcast. I wanted to briefly introduce you. Carolyn Goyder's global reputation as a speaker and voice coach is built on her warm, engaging, relaxed, and highly practical style. Her TEDx on the surprising secrets to speaking with confidence has been viewed over 9 million times and rising. Carolyn, you have a new book, Find Your Voice, right? And it unpacks and develops the secret of speaking with confidence explored in your TED Talk. So welcome to the show.
So great to be here.
A pleasure to have you. Carolyn, so I'm going to jump right in. So I actually had the opportunity to watch your TEDx video, and I found it so interesting how you speak from a place from experience. You open up on that speech and you talk about your experience when you first got on the stage and you were so nervous, and you felt your voice kind of shaky, and you asked the audience, "Can you hear me from the back?" And one of the audience members all the way from the back row said, "Speak up, speak louder." And I think we can all relate to that, as entrepreneurs, as sales professionals, as individuals that are trying to impact change and influence and share our ideas to the world. But it's like we become so small when we hit the stage, and you talked about practical ways on how to overcome that. Talk about that, like that mindset shift that needs to happen, when we are experts, when we're entrepreneurs, or as real estate or sales professionals, we know our stuff. But when it comes to vocalizing those ideas to everyone else, we become small, we shrink.
I love this question, and I see it so much. People show up and they worry about judgment and they worry about visibility. And what happens then is that we kind of shrink, and it's that primeval response to lots of people staring at you, right? Lots of people staring at you a few thousand years ago was a really bad thing. So just telling your nervous system first up when you get on stage that you're safe. The audience want you to do well most of the time, unless it's a competitive pitch, in which case that might not be true. And just like you said, enough to land it well. And I think those things of really telling your system that you're safe and really thinking about how you can help the audience are absolutely essential for entrepreneurs. And I think that's also true in business actually as well, generally, that when you forget the worries and the anxieties and tune into really how you can help people, that's when it tends to take off.
Interesting. I've read so many books on public speaking and leadership, from Simon Sinek to Les Brown, practical advices on how to really impact and influence through your voice. The voice is what we really have to share our story and inject impact. But what are some practical advice that you can give us, the average person that may not be born with that talented gift to be a public speaker, but we want to take on that stage? How can we reduce the nervousness and the blushing and the intimidation of stepping on stage or doing it digitally?
So I think the first thing that messes people up, right, is the actual phrase public speaking. Okay. Because if you think about public dancing or public swimming or public athletics, I mean, it's all public, right? But we don't call it public. And I think there's something that happens to people, I think probably at school, that you stand up in front of the class and everybody laughs at you because, teenagers are mean. And the first thing I would say is it's just speaking. And everybody's good at speaking with the person they love, the person they trust. Speaking to 500 people is just scaling that 500 times. And so if you can see it as speaking and having a conversation and not this great big daunting horrible public speaking thing, I think we can shift mindset very quickly. But I think our culture loves making public speaking feel like a kind of fixed mindset, scary thing. I suppose because it keeps people out. It's a way of asserting a hierarchy. If you want to be disruptive, right? It's a way of saying you get to stand on stage and you don't, because you've been to a school where they teach you how to do it and you haven't. And this is public speaking, and only certain people get to do this. It's definitely true in the UK. And I think America you have your own version of that hierarchy.
Yeah. We know what's going on through our minds and our biology, and we get all sweaty and nervous, and like we begin to feel like a little shaky and our voice begins to shake. But like, what don't we know about the audience or the anticipation of the audience? What can help us if we knew this about the audience, it would put us more at ease? What don't we know what the audience is thinking before we step on stage or while they're watching us the first couple of seconds?
So I think this thing about really stepping into the audience's shoes is the ultimate confidence builder, the ultimate empathy piece. And I learned this from the actor Bill Nighy, actually, he's a British actor, but he's been in all those kind of Love Actually, Pirates of the Caribbean films. And so in 2008, I wrote a book and I interviewed A-list actors about confidence. And he said, I'm always really paranoid when I get a film job or if I have to make a speech. I'm always worried that I'm not going to do it well and I'm going to show up in a way that people are going to judge. I always think they're going to walk me off set on the first day. And he said, the thing that I have learned over the years is to think, how can I help? And in a film set metaphor, if you think about it, he said, there's the producer, the director, the crew, the other actors, the screenwriters, the drivers. There's a whole tribe of people wanting to make this a success. And he said, so I just think now, how can I help?
Okay.
Now, that for me as a speaker, it works so well because I'm an introvert and I hate being on stage, really. But if I think that, it changes everything.
Yeah, I love that question. If we mentally ask ourselves, how can I help? We approach it much differently because now we're just having a conversation with a couple of hundred strangers or a small group of strangers, but it's not about judgment or them judging us. It's really about how can I offer you value, right? And the audience doesn't know what you know. So sometimes as speakers, we think, well, what if they Google what I said? What if they try to cross check me? And what if they start looking at me like if I'm wrong, I'm not an expert, they look confused, and that kind of like throws us off. But most of the time, the audience doesn't know what you know as an expert.
Exactly. And taking a moment, or taking weeks if it's a big speech, to really step into their shoes and really cultivate a beginner's mind.
Yeah.
Just like writing good copy, just like good social media, really don't think about what you know, think about what they don't know and bridge the gap. And it's true for speaking as much as copy,
I have a question for you. I researched you a bit, so I know you have a bit of like theater, you have a lot of theater and acting background, you studied that. What were some of the techniques that you can apply now as a public speaker coach and you show others, like actual techniques that we can do prior to taking the stage?
We can do them right now, actually. That's quite fun. So what you need to know about me is that I am the teacher who needed all this stuff so badly when I started out. And when I trained as an actor, they said, you're in your head, you have no presence, you're not listening, lots of things that are often said to trainee actors. And I really got stuck with that, like lots of speakers do. I didn't really understand how I could change. And I looked at other speakers and other actors and thought, they have so much presence, they have so much charisma. I will never be like that.
Mm.
And the big lesson is simple. It's that, if you think about any 2-year-old, they have presence, they have charisma, they have voice projection. When they show up, you look at them.
Mm-hmm.
We unlearn this stuff because we leave our bodies and we end up in our heads. And I think entrepreneurs with so much to do, this is a really big issue. So the simple thing to do once you've got your lines down and prepped your script and got your deck sorted and rehearsed it is to get back into the body. And I was taught a really simple exercise by a very clever psychiatrist who said, just go into FOFBOK, which is feet on floor.
Feet on floor. Okay.
And if you're sitting, bum on chair. But often when we're making a speech, we're standing. So then we just go forth. And like the actor Laurence Olivier, you just relax your feet. So you think about my right foot is spreading out and relaxed on the floor, like I'm standing on a lovely warm beach.
Mm-hmm.
My left foot is relaxed, like I'm standing on this beach on warm sand. My feet are planted. My knees are soft. I can feel the air on my face. I can feel the clothes on my skin. I can see the audience. And what that's doing is it's bringing you back to peripheral nervous system.
Mm.
And the very clever thing about that is it takes you out of the internal dialogue that's going, you're going to make a speech, you're going to mess up. They're all looking at you because you
Right,
just come back to feet
right.
on floor, relax, air on face, clothes on skin, go.
Go. Okay. So it's the intentional consciousness of your body in its current state.
Yes.
Like I
Which
can literally feel my feet on the floor, my everything, you're conscious of what your body is doing. Okay, interesting. I would think that would make me a little more nervous. No, because then I would be feeling the feet, the legs shaky, the palms sweaty. But you're saying it actually does the opposite and relaxes you.
Well, so the kind of the prologue to that is that you do need to have done the prep. And the thing that fearful speakers often do, and it's a mistake, is they just go, I'm not going to think about this. I'm just going to turn up and I'm going to see what happens. And that
Yeah.
in anything in life, certainly in entrepreneurship, is rarely a great idea.
Right.
Do your research, do your prep, and then launch. Same
Mhm.
with speaking.
Mhm.
And the other thing that we haven't talked about is breathing.
Mm.
Because really, you've got two ways to go as a speaker. You can go into fight or flight, or you can go into rest and digest. Fight or flight, sympathetic nervous system, rest and digest, parasympathetic.
Mhm.
If your hands are shaking and you're rushing and you're tripping over your words and you've got no sense of time, it's like time vanishes,
Mhm.
and not in a good way, that's fight or flight. And we speak really fast in fight or flight, and it's energizing, but it's stressful. The really great Simon Sinek's of the world,
Yeah.
they are in parasympathetic rest and digest. I've seen him speak live in London, and he just walked out on stage in front of 1,000 people like he was having a chat with old friends. And they have simply learned to take, well, I mean, they've learned a lot of things, but as speakers, they've learned to take really conversational breaths.
Mm.
The breaths that you take when you're chatting to a friend, they're low and wide and they're in the belly and they're not rushed. Nervous speakers go, I'm here, I'm talking, I'm really speedy and it's up in my chest and now I'm feeling scared of you because my filter is for threat.
Yeah.
Stop, relax your feet, take a full stop and breathe like you're hanging out with your best mate and you will ace that speech.
Wow. Wow. We often think of public speaking as something that, the Simon Sinek's or the Les Browns, reserved for people that are intentional about taking the stage. But actually, public speaking is a great skill to have when you're in the sales business, because
Oh, yeah.
we have to, give sales presentations to our prospects when we're trying to land that big account, when we're trying to, work with that vendor, whatever it is, or we are the vendor and we're trying to get into that account. So we're constantly having to communicate with strangers. So public speaking is actually a great skill to master or to improve on if you are in the sales business.
So much so. And I also see this in all sorts of areas like products, people who are presenting products all the time.
Right.
It's just so important as a skill. I don't think we can hide anymore because of video, because of the powerful tools that we have technologically. I think everybody needs to find their inner public speaker or just take out public, their inner speaker.
Yeah. Tell me about the importance of finding voice in a digital age. The deep human communication.
So I mean, the thing about the digital age is that it makes us bad at speaking. Because there's loads of studies on, when we hold a mobile phone, we stick our head forward a lot of the time and we lose our alignment. That's really bad for both our voice and our nervous system.
Okay.
When we read emails, we often hold our breath.
Mhm.
And so the problem that I see is this exec, maybe a senior salesperson, got the big pitch, got the big client meeting. And what are they doing in the car before the meeting? They're going through Slack, they're checking emails, they're, calling someone quickly because there's a crisis. And I had one client who was sitting in the car with his boss, and his boss said, look, we've got to land this pitch. It's really important.
Yeah.
Turn your phone off. Let's focus. And he ignored him. Message comes in. First message from his wife. That's fine. Second message, dancing cat from his daughter. Third message, lost out on the deal that you
Yeah.
went up for last week.
Wow.
In that moment, his nervous system goes into pure fight or flight. His heart rate goes off the charts. He's sweating. He's panicking. They walk into the pitch. He totally messes it. He's speaking too fast. He's not listening. He's reactive because he's stressed out. There's no chemistry with him and his boss, let alone with the clients. They don't win it. So by checking his messages just before he goes in, he's got the message about losing out on one deal, but he's also messed up the next one because our devices throw us off, our nervous systems. And if we're not in control of that, we're not really in control of ourselves as humans. It's a real problem.
But is it a way to cope with the nervousness? I feel that, people do that, sales professionals do that right before a pitch presentation because they're trying to reduce the nerves. And so they're checking emails and looking at phone numbers, trying to take that last call as a way to cope with the nervousness. You're saying that's the most horrible thing you can do. Instead, we should do what? What should we be doing 15 minutes before the pitch to
The
land
answers,
that?
yeah, the answers are in acting, an acting technique. Because if you go to a theatre on Broadway or in the West End of London before a show and you walk into the dressing rooms, half an hour before the show goes up, all the actors are in their dressing rooms, not doing anything.
Wow.
They're sitting quietly, they're looking out the window, they might be warming up their voices gently, they might be having a stretch, they might even be having a cigarette. I wouldn't advise it, but they're not checking email, they're not having a big chat, they're not eating, they're just still, quiet, present, and focused on what they've got to do. And I understand for people that can feel quite scary to think about what you've got to do. But if you think about a tennis player, just before they go onto center court, they're not busy, they're quiet. Because if you want to hit peak performance, calm your nervous system. And then when you walk out on the tennis court, on the stage, into the boardroom, you'll meet the adrenaline and it will spike performance. And that's everything.
What should we calm our thoughts before that 10-minute presentation, before that sales presentation, or should we be looking at our slide deck and just rehearsing?
I learned this, early on in exams, that it's like the night before the exam, stop studying. Just trust that you've done enough work and just trust that getting calm and ready is enough. Now, the thing is, we never, ever feel ready, right? Even when I did that TEDx, I had done so much work. And someone said to me, you're the most prepared of anybody in this room, but I didn't feel ready because you never do.
Mm-hmm.
You have to trust that you're ready enough and then just go.
Mm-hmm. So interesting. I can somewhat relate. I think sometimes I over prepare the night before. I'll look through, if I'm hosting or moderating an event from start to finish, look through the script and the pronunciations of the speakers and the panelists, and how do I transition to this without it being awkward. And then the morning of, I probably won't even eat that much because I don't want anything biologically to start shaking up. And so while everyone's, grabbing food, donuts, coffee, breakfast, I'm nothing in my systems because I feel that nervousness, the adrenaline, the rush. And then once I'm in there, and it's almost like I still feel the nerves, but 3 minutes within, the nerves go away, and it feels more like I'm in competition. Like, let's deliver, let's nail this, let's do a great job. We're having a really, really good time, and it's a really good conversation. It's going to be a really good event. But the moments leading to it, yeah, it's nerve-wracking. It's so nerve-wracking. I still don't get over the nervousness, to be honest.
I don't know if we ever do. I think that's the truth. I mean, You know, like you, I've been speaking for quite a long time, and I still feel nervous, and I actually think that's a really good sign. I think the other thing, working in talking to actors for this book, people like Helen Mirren, they all said, I get nervous before a show, and you know what, that's a good thing, because nerves show you care. They give you peak performance. So in some ways they're like a kind of tailwind that lifts you up as long as you are able to use them. When they become a headwind is when we panic, or if we're not prepared.
Very interesting. I'm going to reference an interview that I saw with you and Simon Morton, in which, you say that, there are many events, whether we're talking business events and panelists and discussions, that women are disproportionately represented, right? So there are more men. You'll have a panel of all men, but no women, right? And you said, looking at it, it's not so much the guy's fault, the male's fault, but it really is when women are presented with the opportunity to speak, they decline the invitation because they don't feel equipped. And I thought, wow, that is like, mind blowing. Either because I can relate to it. There have been times that people tell me like, you're ready, or can you speak? And I'll say, no, I won't take on that role. I don't think I'm an expert on that. Let me just do this instead. Let me just host, let me just moderate. Or perhaps there are times that I may have myself decline that opportunity without realizing it, because I feel a lack of preparation than I don't even say my male counterparts. I just feel a lack of, expertise, advice on that topic. But talk to me a little bit about that. Why is it that women have adapted that mindset? Does it start from childhood?
Gosh, that's a huge question, isn't it? So I'll talk about this particular thing about women saying no. And partly, I think there is something about when you're a rare creature on a panel or at a conference, there is something about the visibility. You're kind of representing, your whole gender, right? So I can see why some women will say no to that. I also think now this comes from a wonderful woman called Denise Graveline, who has sadly died, but ran a brilliant website which still exists called The Eloquent Woman.
Okay.
She was wonderful, and she was also my coach for that TEDx talk. And she said something really, really powerful, which is that women haven't been speaking on the public stage relatively very long. We didn't have the vote in this country until, not very long ago. And certainly we weren't a regular feature on the public stage until, 100 years ago, if that, right? So she said, if you get a strange reaction as a woman on stage, it's not necessarily about you. It's more that you're like a unicorn. You're unusual on that stage. And so the reaction may be strange. And I think women are conscious of that. But of course, the paradox is, if you keep saying no and women are rare, then that's never going to change. So it's kind of incumbent on all women listening to this, all entrepreneurs listening to this. The next time you get invited, say yes, because you are changing the paradigm.
What if you feel you're not equipped, you're not ready, you're not prepared on the top, you don't feel like you're an expert on the topic, you're just saying, just say yes.
So don't, if they're asking you to speak on something that's not your zone, then say, I'm happy to speak, but this is my zone. It's like media interviews. I don't want to talk about that. I am happy to come and talk. This is what I want to talk about, because I think owning your subject is really important. If you think that 1,000-person conference is too much, say, can I do a smaller breakout event, or can I be a guest on a panel? So there's something about, you say yes, but take ownership. Don't let them bully you into something that's not right, because if you're not ready, it won't help your confidence.
I see. Speaking from a place of experience personally, I always struggled with public speaking as a child. I was first generation. I'm, both immigrant parents. English was not my first language. Spanish was my native language. So I was always conscious as a child that I had an accent, that I could not pronounce the words and the phonetics, and, two words that make a different sound. So I really struggled with reading in the classrooms. I remember as a kid, like I really still have memories of this, feeling so nervous that I felt like I constantly had to go to the bathroom whenever it was time for the class to take turns. and read out loud. So I kind of like timed it, and I knew how many students before me, and I would raise my hand and I would disappear until I was skipped, right? So that's like, it carried me through grammar school. It wasn't until college that I came out of that mindset, because we had to work with other young adults and doing group presentations. I was also a young mom, so it was different mindset at that time. But why is it that we have this like lack of self-confidence? Maybe personally speaking, I consciously knew like I had an accent, I could not pronounce the words, I would stutter a lot, I didn't like the sound of my voice. I was conscious of all that, but either can we overcome that, or how can we get past that at a young age where that doesn't become so much of a challenge in our adulthood?
This is something I hear, this story I hear so much from people who don't like public speaking, that they're kind of the trauma might be too much, but they're kind of this fear that comes from those reading in class situations is enormous.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's really normal.
Yeah.
And what I tend to do with people who come with that is say to them, let's go back to that moment and let's think about what that you in that classroom needed then. What would you give her then? And we go back and we think, well, what would you give her actually? What does she need? Yeah, actually, for real.
Well, definitely not a Shakespearean like phrase where I couldn't pronounce half the words in the passage.
So hard.
Or just like, I don't know, perhaps like speaking exercises that would have made me feel more comfortable speaking in front of other students, where I wasn't just thrown in there,
Support.
Yeah. So I don't know. I always remember those experiences all throughout grammar school and even like into high school. I dreaded the idea of speaking and just not even standing, sitting in my desk. I think that was even more nerve-wracking. You're in a chair, glued to the chair in your desk in your textbook, and you're hearing the voice of the student before you, and you're up next.
Creeping dread.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, if we were coaching, we would work on giving that you then the support that you needed. And then we'd also think about the beliefs, the mindset that gave you, and how we move that mindset on. Because, what now is that speaking in a slightly different way to everybody else is actually a benefit, right? It's being different is really powerful. And I think as adults, we know that and we're better at owning it. But sometimes the belief needs updating, the mindset needs updating.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're aware of is where it started. And that is really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I often ask, where did this start? Do you remember the first time you felt this?
Mm-hmm.
And then you track back and you tweak it and bring the new learning to the present.
Mm-hmm. I think what's also, and I love your feedback on this, what's helped me get over the fear of public speaking was I had to be conscious of the sound of my voice. And I realized when I was younger, my voice was more pitchy and much more quiety, and it would spike up. But now I've been like, it's almost like if my voice would be graphed, like it just be louder, I would see the lines go louder and more amplified. But now as an adult, I'm aware of that. Like I'm aware how I can control my voice and what's an appropriate level or sound when I'm on stage versus on social media versus a one-on-one conversation.
I love that. And it's that awareness, and we all have these incredible voices, these instruments within. And so my question then is, how did you learn about the kind of variety and power in your voice? Did you sing? Did you act? Did you practice at home?
Mm-hmm. Definitely college, when we were grouped with other college students and we had to do a presentation, and the atmosphere was different. You weren't called upon to read passages. You were given a task, a responsibility to educate the class, to impress the professor. And so it became a challenge for me. And I told myself, I remember, I was also, young single mom at the time. I said, I no longer want to be bound by the fear of public speaking.
Right.
If I'm going to do well in life, I really need to get over this fear. That was really a fear of mine, just taking the stage and allowing anyone to hear my voice. So I was literally just like bound by that fear. So that forced me to become better. It was also a different environment. There There was no rows and no raising hands or reading passages. There was more of a contribution of knowledge. And so that allowed me to be free and say, I really like this. I really enjoy this.
That's such a powerful description of how you go from a fixed mindset of I can't do this to I can do this and I enjoy it. And I would invite anybody who has had that bad experience at school or early on to find an environment just like the one you found, where it encourages you to practice in a supportive way to find your voice. It could be a drama school, it could be Toastmasters, it could be with a friend at work who wants to support you. But if you can find an environment where your confidence can build, that, like you've just said, that changes everything. It's magic. It's really magic.
What's been some of the cases or clients you've had with what was their dilemma with public speaking? Like, was it just getting better at sales negotiation, getting better at client presentations, getting over stuttering, getting over talking fast? What were like some of the stories you remember? And then where's your client at now? How have they progressed?
So I think of a lovely client in the US, and she is C-suite, is a huge global business. And she said to me at the beginning, it's just like your story. I had to do a presentation in class when I was 12. And my dad said to me, just do it without a script, you'll be fine. And she said, so I did the presentation without a script, but I forgot my lines and I went blank. And all my class laughed at me. And she said, ever since then, I've avoided presentation. She'd gone right to the exco in this business without doing presentations. And she said, now I've got this 800-person marketing team. I've got this big job. I have to stand up on stage at the next roadshow. And she said, I am terrified. And what we worked on was her first doing all the things that you described, really feeling supported, really trusting that she had something to say, really pushing through that belief. And it's quite painful sometimes that said, I'm not a good speaker. Something that was really important to do was to help her find words that she really believed in. Because if you've got words that feel like a present for the audience, you really want to give them because they feel good, it makes it feel nicer. And then we just practiced, and we practiced getting her grounded. Like you said, we practiced her getting her voice projected. We practiced her walking across the stage, feeling comfortable. We thought about what she wore.
Wow.
Until the point where she could walk out in front of 800 people.
Wow.
And then she walked out in front of 4,000 people. And then she did Cannes Lion. And
Wow.
she's off now. She's rocking it.
Wow, you just gave me goosebumps. It's almost like watching your athlete, and you've been training your athlete and now they've become top of their game, and you're like, wow, look at what I've done. Look at what
I
I've done.
love it. It's like when they fly, it's kind of when they don't need you anymore is almost the joy, because
Yes.
you've done your thing. They're free.
But I love how you're saying with this client, it was really preparation. You actually train your client on walking on a stage, and the posture and what she wore, and getting herself to feel comfortable on a stage, right? Most of us don't have you as a coach. We wish we could have someone like you, but most of us, the average sales professional, we don't have that. What can we do? Practical advice that we can do to help us prepare for that seminar, for that client presentation.
So there's a really useful piece of research, can't say that, which says that rehearsing under pressure is the most important thing that you can do. So what I would say is, yeah, you may not have a voice coach, but you do probably have someone on the team or someone in the office who you could say, look, I've got this big pitch, I've got this big presentation, I've pretty much nailed the content. I'd love to run it past you, and then I'll do the same for you next time. Because if it matters, there is really nothing more important than getting supportive feedback and practice from a real human.
Interesting. I love your feedback on this. So one of the things as an adult, not as a kid, as an adult that has given me insight or helped me with public speaking is at night, I would YouTube political debates or politicians on doing an interview, let's say like the late night show, or doing an interview like one of these shows, and just hear how they compose sentences and words together. And when the host would ask them like a really hardball question, I would actually like just watch it. How do they respond? Like, wow, that's a really intrusive question. Wow, they were just insulted on like national TV. How are they responding? How do they handle that? And it's so interesting. I picked up so much from everyone from Cory Booker to like Omarosa to like Barack Obama to all like these like, politicians, and just like see like, wow, they kept their composure. Wow, why aren't they like upset and taking the mic off and walking off, the stage? So that has really helped me like see like, okay, what do you do when you're being interviewed and you're under pressure? And
I love that. I love that. And it's modeling. And the first question I ask clients is, who do you admire as a speaker? Because that's it. If you watch someone and you really love what they do, you can model a lot of the behaviors, just like you're saying. So, if you're someone listening and you think, I really want to be a great speaker, just like you're saying, go out, get curious and watch great speakers, and then just steal like an artist. Best way.
So interesting. And no one's born a great orator, right? Even
Nobody.
those that are naturally gifted, you almost have to like become it or practice it, even I don't know if you heard of the Les Brown story. I watched an interview with him the other day, and he talks about he was the dumber of the two twins. And every time he'd walk into a classroom, the kids would laugh at him and make fun of him. From his brother, he was yeah, and then he had a teacher called Mr. Washington. Mr. Washington said, Les, don't you ever believe what other people believe on you. That is not who you really are. And through that, he said he was so determined from that day, that one teacher that believed in him and said, you are greater, you can do better. All you need is practice. And that teacher, Mr. Washington, said communication is key. Get better at communication, study it. And so Les talks about the journey of just like becoming like this influencer, but the purpose of creating impact. So, that leads me to my next question, is taking ownership of the impact we have on others with our voice. Talk about that.
The voice is this magical instrument, and we don't think about our voices very much because they're unconscious, right? For most people, unless you're a singer. But if you think about all the people you admire, whether it's the Obamas, whoever, they have voices that reach out and grab your attention. And they're not loud, shouty voices. They're centered, congruent, relaxed voices. And all of us have that voice in our easy Sunday morning moments with friends. So the trick for all of us, it's not really a trick, is to notice how you speak when you're at your most relaxed. And then think about almost like a transfer of a file, how you take that to the situations that are high pressure. And the simple thing that you can do, it's a little bit out there for some people, but it really does make a difference, is to sing before you present. So if you're a salesperson, you've got a big pitch, and you've got to learn the introduction and the wrap because it needs to be polished, and you're at home in the morning, sounds really silly, but take the introductory paragraph and just sing it to yourself to pretty much any tune. I wouldn't do death metal, a bit shouty, something that's going to be nice and relaxed for your voice. And if you then go straight into speaking it, you'll find that your voice has more music, it has more resonance, more buzz, and it feels more flowy. And if you just do that, if you just sing every morning in the car or when you make a coffee, you'll notice that your voice starts like an engine really well. It doesn't get sticky. Voices love just use them and they work better.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. So sing it, sing that. And that helps with what? Just like easing your voice, but also the memory of that introductory script.
Yeah, so it's both. If you think, so the voice is an instrument and it's exhaled air. It's powered out by the stomach muscles, the intercostal muscles, and the diaphragm. When we sing, we use all the right muscles, and we also get the larynx to move more fluidly, so we have more notes. The other thing that it's doing is rehearsing your lines. So you get this double whammy of my voice sounds musical, it sounds centered, it sounds resonant, and I've got my lines down. It's kind of like a win-win. You know, why wouldn't you do that?
What about using your voice in our personal relationships? Talk to me about that.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I think as someone who is frequently, you know, could bring more of my professional tools to my personal life, I think the thing that's most important in our personal relationships is slowing down
Mm.
and being centered. And the voice, because it's breath
Mhm.
and presence, is a really powerful tool. So, you know, my note to myself frequently when I'm rushing is slow down,
Mm.
be present,
Mm.
listen.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's hardest with the people we love. We're sometimes much, much better at doing that with professionally.
Mm.
Certainly for me, it's a note to self.
I'll give you an example, and you tell me, how should someone or should I respond? Let's assume, two spouses or myself and a spouse, fighting, and the spouse is telling me, you never do this, you never do that, you never do this, you're never on time. Very accusatory, right? And the instinctual response to be for me or for the other person would be, you don't know what you're talking about. That's not true. That's not right. And getting very defensive. How should one respond when we're feeling, in our personal relationships, when we're feeling accused or that they're coming down on us hard? How can we control our voice where now it becomes a different type of conversation?
So this question takes me to the work of a brilliant family therapist called Virginia Satir, who created what she called these 5 behaviors. They're called the Satir categories.
Mhm.
One of them is blamer, which is what you just described. One of them is placator, which is often the one that people do back. You know, you say da 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 da, and they say, I didn't do that.
Right.
Another one is distractor, which is when you get angry with me, I just change the subject. And the final one is kind of complete shutdown, which is called computer.
Mhm.
Now, what Satir says is that those 4 behaviors, computer, distractor,
Mhm.
placator, and blamer,
Mhm.
if they are played out in front of you, don't play them back, because that just then becomes this kind of vicious circle. She says what you play back to them is what she calls leveler. And leveler, she describes as being the person who can say what they see, say what they hear, say what they feel without blame. And that is a really powerful place to be. And leveler vocally is a kind of calm, centered, controlled state. Easier said than done, right? In a fight with the person that you love. But I do think it's worth remembering that when someone comes at you in blamer, meet them in leveler.
How? Give me a specific example. What would your response be to the
I
blamer?
mean, if I, I'd be lying if I said I do this well all the time. But if I was in a good mode, I would go back, I would ground myself, I would remember to breathe,
Mm.
because so often what we do is we hold our breath in that moment. So I would breathe out, I would wait for a relaxed breath in, and then I would say what I see, hear, or feel to be true without blame.
So would you say, you know what, hon, you're right. I could see why you feel that way. I could see why that made you react that way. I could see when I did that at that example, and you're holding on to that, you're feeling that way. So is it more of like verbalizing a recognition of their feelings before
Well,
anything else?
the linguistic side of this would be you could pick up some of the words that they've used exactly. You know, I understand what you've said about feeling angry about this.
I see.
Because if we echo their language patterns, that makes them feel heard. And so often what we do in arguments, we've all done it, is I shout at you, you shout back.
That's
Neither
right.
of us listens to each other, and we get really angry and then walk out.
That's right. That's right.
Those are my arguments anyway. And actually, when there's any kind of connection, it's because we ground ourselves, we level with them, and we hear what they're saying. It's really hard.
Really hard.
when you get emotional, but it's a really good thing to do. And it's what those great interviewers, when people are being interviewed and they stay centered, that's what they're doing as well.
Yeah, no, that's tough. And I think that like that requires practice, right? You're not gonna get it
Oh
right
yeah.
the first time, but you just, but we're constantly, interpersonal relationships with work, with spouse, with our kids, with our clients, with our vendors, constant
It's
communication.
hard.
Yeah, so that's a good advice, putting it into practice with my 16-year-old.
I'll try it with mine.
You said something earlier about women, until recently not having the opportunity to take on stages, right? And it brought me back, we think about like the greatest Gothic novel, Frankenstein,
Oh yeah.
and it was written by Mary Shelley. And I think about a lot of the female writers, during this time that had to hide their voice in writing, in books, because it was not yet socially acceptable for women to be recognized as great orators, great writers, great, leaders, right? So they hid behind their writing. And I do remember in college when we were asked, what to major in. And I just remember just saying, well, I'll do writing. Like I would never be a sales professional. That you crazy? That's just not me. I would never be a public speaker. You crazy? That's just not me. I would never be a marketer because that requires talking to people. And I would never take a business classes. That requires talking to people. And I remember telling myself, I'll just major in writing. I'll major in writing because I can express myself through my words, just not through my voice.
Yeah, it's a belief that was ingrained over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Salem, there's lots in our history as a gender that says don't say anything out of place, don't stand out, keep quiet, do the thing they're asking you to do. And you can see, arguably that behavior sometimes still plays out at work, even though we kind of know that we're safe now.
Yeah.
It takes a long time for mindset to shift.
Yeah, absolutely. Caroline, share with me, what new projects are you working on? Tell me about the launch of your book. Fill us in of how we can learn more about what you currently are doing and how we can continue to follow you.
So if you like these kinds of tips, then the thing to do is to sign up at carolinegoyder.com, because I have a weekly email where I take a question from the audience. Like this week, we're talking about pauses. And next week, we're talking about how to handle interviews and how to pull together a concise answer. Mm-hmm. So that weekly newsletter is a really good way to kind of learn more about these skills.
Okay.
When the pandemic hit, we went digital, and I am about to finalize a digital course called Master Your Meetings.
Okay.
Which is perfect for sales professionals because the need came from salespeople. Mm-hmm. I was being asked, I have this great team, but when they have to go out in front of clients, they don't have enough impact or credibility. Yeah. We ran the training live over Zoom, and then over the last year and a half, I've turned it into a digital course. And it's a self-paced, 4-module, 2.5 hour maximum time, which will give everybody, particularly someone coming into sales meetings new, all the tools they need to really have impact in front of clients. And that's going to be ready by May. It's launching really soon.
Perfect. Are you on social media?
Find me on Insta, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook.
Beautiful. What's the social media handle?
At Caroline Goyder on all of them.
Okay, Caroline, it's been a pleasure and an honor to do this interview with you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Total pleasure. Thank you for having me. I love your questions and I love your stories.
So that wraps up our episode with Caroline Goyder. We talked about how any sales professional can use practical strategies to nail that pitch presentation or give a killer speech to an audience. Make sure that you catch the episode on Anchor, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on YouTube, and tune in to the next episode of the Disruptors Network podcast.